Let's take it back to the 1800s. Before the gleaming vaults, the polished commercials, and the promises of customer-first banking, there were banks built on the backs of human beings. And not just figuratively. Some institutions, whose names still command billions on Wall Street today, literally accepted enslaved Africans as loan payments, as property, as bond, as interest. Scope News presents a deep dive. One of those institutions whose history is stained with this practice is the modern-day giant known as Wells Fargo Bank. Now, Wells Fargo didn't start out with shackles and slave blocks in its San Francisco lobbies, but the banks it absorbed did. And what the company doesn't want the public to know is that this legacy of exploitation, trafficking, and racial finance was not only foundational, it was profitable. In 2008, during the Great Financial Collapse, Wells Fargo acquired a struggling institution by the name of Wachovia. That acquisition came with more than just deposit accounts and mortgage books. It came with skeletons, real, traceable, blood-stained skeletons. Wachovia's predecessor banks were based in the Deep South. The Georgia Railroad and Banking Company, the Bank of Charleston, and other antebellum institutions. These banks didn't just cater to slaveholders, they were slaveholders. Records show these banks took human lives as collateral. If a slave owner needed a loan, he could offer up an enslaved black man, woman, or child as a guarantee. Default on the loan, the bank could take ownership of the person, sell them at auction, profit. One Wachovia-connected bank even recorded full ledger entries titled Bond and Mortgage of Negroes. That's not a conspiracy, that's not rumor. That's a scanned document now archived in slavery-era disclosure filings, available in public city reports like the one submitted to the city of Philadelphia in 2025. That ledger is not a metaphor, it's a death certificate in financial form. A human being, reduced to collateral, signed over like a wagon or a bale of cotton. This is what Wells Fargo doesn't put in the diversity brochures. This is what doesn't get a press release during Black History Month, but the receipts are there. Wells Fargo's slave-linked ties have been known behind the scenes for years, but rarely addressed in the national media. In a quiet admission, the bank issued an apology back in 2005 when evidence surfaced of Wachovia's involvement in slavery. That apology came only after mounting pressure forced them to disclose the details to regulators. There was no headline, no settlement, no reparations. Just a few lines in a corporate report and a hope that time would bury the shame. But Scope News doesn't bury history. Let's pause and ask, what does it mean for a modern bank to have wealth built on forced labor? What does it mean when a 30-year mortgage is approved today on the same financial structures once used to mortgage black children? Because it wasn't just banks doing this. It was the entire financial ecosystem. Insurance companies insured the lives of enslaved people to protect slaveholders' investments. Auction houses tracked profits. State governments backed the property laws. And when those institutions merged, evolved, rebranded, or were acquired, they didn't lose their capital. They didn't lose their interest payments. They brought all of it into the 20th and 21st century, clean on the outside, rotten at the core. Wells Fargo inherited those profits. And while the names on the vaults changed, the quiet wealth did not. This is not ancient history. This is within living memory. Some of the people who were enslaved under these systems lived into the 1940s and 50s. Their children are still alive. Their descendants still get denied loans. Their communities are still underbanked. And that's not a coincidence. Even as recently as the 2020s, Wells Fargo has been accused of discriminatory practices, denying black applicants mortgages at disproportionately higher rates than their white counterparts. So while the ledgers may look different, the gatekeeping still feels familiar. A bank can change its logo, it can restructure, it can launch a DEI committee, but it cannot wash away the smell of blood that seeps from slave-era ledgers. It is not enough to say that was the past. Not when the past was never paid back. Not when generational wealth was stolen, sold, and reinvested into skyscrapers, stock dividends, and inherited power. Wells Fargo's silence isn't just about avoiding shame, it's about avoiding accountability. Because if these receipts were made mainstream, if the public truly understood how many institutions benefited from black suffering, there would be questions about restitution, about repair, about what justice actually looks like. And that's what Wells Fargo doesn't want you to know. They accepted slaves for loan payments. They absorbed those profits, and they still benefit from that system today. Ask yourself, would your bank tell you that? Because the truth is, they're banking on your silence. Scope News tells the truth. Here are the facts. Special thanks to the 2025 City of Philadelphia slavery-era disclosure filings, which document the exact mortgage ledgers of predecessor banks like the Bank of Charleston. We also reference Wachovia's 2005 corporate admission of slave-era ties, confirmed through archived Wells Fargo corporate statements. Historical analysis is supported by records from corporateaccountability.org and the University of North Carolina Law Review on the use of enslaved people as collateral. These sources confirm that enslaved Africans were used in bond, mortgage, and interest contracts by financial institutions whose assets and legacies became part of Wells Fargo's corporate ancestry. Legal disclaimer. This report is for educational, informational, and historical commentary purposes. Scope News aims to illuminate systemic truths with factual evidence and compelling analysis. Viewer discretion is advised, as the content may be disturbing and emotionally heavy. The material presented includes historical information about slavery, corporate misconduct, and racial exploitation. All information is derived from publicly available historical records, city disclosures, university research, and verified publications. Scope News does not allege that current employees or leadership of Wells Fargo participated in or condone these past actions, but does assert that corporate legacy and financial inheritance from such actions remain a public concern.